The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
You're listening to the Alldus podcast, the ServiceNow series. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Jason Veiock. Jason is the founder and CEO at Bearing. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're delighted to have you. So Jason, lots to cover, but let's start with yourself, please, as we do with all of our guests. Could you give us a little summary of your background in technology and what your journey has been from where you started, some of the roles you've held along the way, most importantly, what's led you to where you are today as the founder and CEO at Bearing?
Yeah, well, the journey in technology is easy. It's pretty short. I founded a technology company last year. Prior to that, I was actually an end user. So as I'm sure we'll get into, at the end of the day, Bearing is digitally transforming corporate security operations, physical security, on the ServiceNow platform. But really, my background was I was an end user. So I started my career in the U.S. military. I was in federal law enforcement for a good chunk of time. And then I left mid-career. I was the first physical security hire for GoDaddy back in 2016 after they IPO'd. GoDaddy made lots of good decisions in 2016, but two of them, apparently, hopefully one was hiring me and the other one was procuring ServiceNow. And so over my course of time at GoDaddy, I was able to work with a team, right? I did not do the coding, but we created a custom app to manage all of our security operations on ServiceNow. Eventually, ServiceNow found out about it in a good way. And, there was some discussion about whether they would build it internally or move out. But, we had a unique relationship where they worked with a VC. They brought me in. We seeded a company in this white space to solve a problem that ServiceNow was seeing across its user base, right? Which you have all of these modules attacking all of these inefficient areas in the business, but where did physical security fit? And so, I say I'm very lucky. My wife reminds me that we sometimes create our own luck through relationships and things like that. But yeah, unlikely entrepreneur, but very excited to do it. And, while I am not a technology native person, right? I was badge and a gun type guy. I had to Google what an API was when I joined GoDaddy. Frankly, I had to Google what GoDaddy was when I joined GoDaddy because I wasn't quite sure. Now I can talk all about domains and supporting the small business if you want to do that. But, over that time, I learned all of those things. And, really, I think, going to probably the next part about what Bearing is and what we do is we're solving corporate security problems using the power of workflow automation on ServiceNow.
Thank you so much for that background, because I think it's super important to hear from leaders and founders, particularly when they have a non-traditional path such as yourself, because it does give evidence that it's possible people can do amazing things when they step outside their comfort zone, and you don't need to be starting as a PhD from Stanford who's a technologist. If you see a business opportunity and you have exposure to solving it in a different forum, you can make a business out of that. So we're gonna segue perfectly then into Bearing's mission and the conversations that you're having at the customer level.
Well, let me even just say one more thing about what you were just mentioning, and I think it's really important. With the advent of AI, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, but with this, recent momentum and traction, you're finding that maybe that developer founder persona is changing.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited because I'm getting old, right? I'm 50 years old, but I am lucky in that with those 50 years came almost 30 years of military security and intelligence experience. And that's something that AI doesn't have. Now I can take that experience and I can take my background, right? I went to a Jesuit university, so I was taught to think and act critically. Now all of a sudden knowledge and the ability to think critically empowered by AI actually changes that persona. And I think it's one of the things that enabled this opportunity. So sorry I cut you off and I went back to the last question.
Super
but what's
relevant.
the next one?
Yeah, it's super relevant because it segues nicely into the mindset. You're thinking problem solution as you see it, and then the tools are just the tools in your toolkit to solve said problems. And coming from your background, having been brought into GoDaddy and to solve a problem like this, GoDaddy is just one of thousands of companies who are going to have this problem, and it's evolving all the time. So the mechanism, aspects of AI and ServiceNow are just part of the business need. So that brings us full circle to Bearing. You identified a clear business need and you launched the company. So when you're speaking to your customers, help educate the audience a bit, define what the problem is, what are some of the variations of the challenges that your customers are having, and then we'll get into what Bearing is doing to solve said problems.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway too, and I love it because one of our foundational elements in our culture is we're a security platform built by security practitioners. So when you think about kind of maybe the traditional technology mindset of I'm an engineer, I build something, it's cool. Now I have to go find a problem that it solves, and I have to go adjust it to make sure that it solves that problem. I get to product market fit. We started with problem market fit. And so going into your next question, right? Like, what do we do? I'll be clear, and there's hopefully people listening to this that I've worked with over the years, and they'll laugh when I say it, but I was a pain in the butt end user. If you listen to Mark Cuban, he says, find an inefficient market and bring in efficiencies, and that's the key to building a business. Well, physical security is one of the most inefficient markets in the world. Right. I mean, it is heavily manual. You have tons of point solutions. They're not connected to each other. So you have a lack of visibility, and you have a lack of automation, and you have, paying people to sit in a room and do things manually in a spreadsheet that should be automated. And we're not even talking about AI yet, right? We're just talking about workflow automation. Yeah. And really, that's the value. Right. So what we're doing is we're solving for those inefficiencies. And part of it is if you go back, and that's why, listen, I drank the Kool-Aid, I've got the tattoo, I'm all in on ServiceNow. But if you go back and look at ServiceNow's journey, go back to 2008, 2010, 2012. What were the problems that IT had? You had a bunch of people with point solutions that were working out of spreadsheets that had too many events they could handle manually, right? Yeah. That had no automation and systems not talking to each other. Great. Yeah. So listen, I like to pretend that I'm a smart person, but actually I'm a historian by training. So what I do is I just pay attention to what other smart people did. ServiceNow solved this problem for IT. And maybe better than a historian, what I'm able to do is I can see the parallels. So I don't think IT and physical security are different because I can get rid of the beeps and squeaks and the nuance and just say, bunch of point solutions, bunch of manual processes, inability to handle things at scale. Oh, there's a tool for that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's actually the origin story of where this all started, because I walked across the NOC and I said, all right, guys, explain to me this ITSM thing. And I said, time out. So at the end of the day, you have this tool that you structure data on the front end around outages and incidents and things that went bang and broke. Yeah. And then you have this ticket that I can categorize and subcategorize and put a bunch of attributes and put my work notes in and have an embedded knowledge base. And they went, yeah. And I said, and if I use all that right, I get these great reports that I can customize and put into dashboards. And they said, yeah. And I said, well, that's exactly what I need. Right. And, the fact that ITSM, now it's not out of the box, right? And we'll get into probably some of the nuance of why and how we built Bearing and how we provide that value. But the best part about it for us is that the value of ServiceNow and workflow automation really just needed a little bit of nuance in our particular industry to take all that power and apply it effectively.
Yeah.
But what that takes are security practitioners that know the problem. And frankly, we're not bound by technology. I think technologists sometimes, rightfully, right, they're explorers. Yeah. They're going to go push the edges and they're going to make this thing that nobody thought could be made. Well, we're taking the thing that's made and we're applying it because it's best in class. And we're applying it to a problem that really needs a solution.
Yeah.
It's
just you're so right, because when you take the view via that lens, you're going from what's the problem, what's the solution, what's working, what's out there, and then using your expertise layering on top, you're already working backwards from what's the most efficient way to fix this problem. So that encapsulates what you're doing at Bearing. Let's talk about, since launching, the conversations that you're having with your customers. What are the most common issues that you're running into, and how is Bearing, built on ServiceNow, using its AI capabilities, solving these problems? I think people who are not familiar with the security space may not be as aware of how challenging it is and how common the problems are, and why there's such a massive opportunity for a Bearing to go out and solve these problems at scale.
Well, I mean, let's think about it, really at the highest level. What does a corporate security team do? Right. At the end of the day, the corporate security team is there to protect and enable the operations and the assets of the business. So the people, the widgets, the places, the things, right? Is all of this working? So now let's take a step back and say, gosh, I wish there was a tool where the business cataloged all of their assets. Oh, wait, it's on ServiceNow. So why would security not be on ServiceNow? Right. And sometimes the simplest answers are the hardest to see. Because, and look, we all have biases in the world, right? And a common bias that we encounter is, ServiceNow is an IT tool. Wrong. ServiceNow was an IT tool. One of the reasons that I got to know everybody at ServiceNow is because I was one of the earliest adopters of their workplace services delivery module. And I joined their product advisory committee, and I got to know folks. And it was interesting to me because, again, I wasn't a real estate person. I just happened to be involved in the real estate team, and that was my responsibility. But the question came down of, well, time out. We've already got everybody at our organization going to ServiceNow to request a laptop, software for that laptop, open up a help desk ticket, load a vendor and procure to pay, search a company policy, open a case with HR. Why would we send them anywhere else to book a desk? Right? Why would I create more work for my CIO? Because now you have to do like an ERP integration and an SSO integration, and you have to cause work for your security and privacy team to go out and look and say, are these guys SOC 2 type 2? Are they doing pen testing? Are they following all the best practices? And we have European operations. Are they compliant with GDPR? And. Well, the beauty of operating on ServiceNow as a store certified app, and I think it's important too, one of our distinctions is we're native and exclusive. We are built on, not bolted on. So we did not build something and say it'd be cool if we leverage ServiceNow. We built this native to ServiceNow, and it's the only way that we go to market. So, our customers are the data controller. ServiceNow is the data processor. We're able to blend into that workflow data fabric that exists today, right? And if we want to talk about AI, I'll show how we leverage that, right? We were very lucky. We were an early adopter of AI Agent Studio. And so we found out about it at Sales Kickoff this year, and we built something for Knowledge. But we won an AI Innovation Award. And I think this really tells the story, right? Because
please share a little bit about that story, because that's what has led to you being here today with us. One of my colleagues caught your talk and said, we got to get Jason on to talk about this, because it was a great example. And the turnaround from Sales Kickoff in January to something into production by May is phenomenal. So please, if you could just share a little bit on that.
Something available in production by May, I think is key to say, right? We did not have it deployed by May. But what we were able to do was leverage the data fabric. Remember how I said that ServiceNow, right? Organizations have decided that they are going to store their assets and their operations on ServiceNow. Yeah. Well, that is a data-rich environment. And so my background, again, I was a GoDaddy B2C company, lots of very, very happy customers, but sometimes you get one that's not. And they would tell us on the phone, and they would show up in an office. Well, it all comes down to, can we get that report to come in? Yeah. Well, now that ServiceNow has become a CRM, and that was the big news at Sales Kickoff this year, right? CSM is now a CRM. Well, great, because that means as a security team, I can put AI agents anywhere in the business. They can be on 24/7, 365. They can operate in a compliant way without bias, right? With in line with all the company policies and just the knowledge that I create for, to then go operate. And so what we did was we said, let's put an AI agent that's going to scan every interaction in the CRM. So it could be a virtual chat, a live chat, a telephone transcript, and email. But we train the agent to observe, report, and detect, observe, detect, and report on early indicators of workplace violence. So now we don't have to worry about a call taker saying, is that something I need to be worried about? Should I tell security? Because security is going to be there. And if hopefully a lot of people on the call don't know a lot about workplace violence, but in the threat management world, we refer to it as concerning communication or leakage. So we created an agent that sat in this, and that's the beauty, right? It sits with the business. You don't wait for the business to tell you about the thing. You sit where the business gets done, as close to the point of friction as possible. And you're able to scan at scale. And then, of course, we use workflow automation and some agentic workflows to do the things that a human would do, right? Because the CRM is going to have a lot of information about that customer. We can use that to conduct a threat investigation. We can run open source searches and some investigative database searches, right? Because we're going to look for all the things that threat managers look for. Familial stressors, financial stressors, right? Are there criminal history or access to firearms? All of those things, when you bring them together, tell you you may have a problem, right? And we were able to actually do the same thing with HR. So think about in the HR world, unfortunately, also a prime place for workplace violence. Terminations are hard. So, if obviously people get AI, I think they understand it. If they're listening to this podcast, they probably get agents on ServiceNow. You have to have a trigger. So, right, in the CSM world, it is the interaction closed. In the HR world, it's an employee scheduled for termination. But we could go a step deeper and we could say, is that employee not rehirable, fired for cause, right? Those types of things. We can trigger on those attributes because those are the ones we really need to worry about. And then you can run that whole background. And it's a data-rich environment, right? Because you have the HRC there. You can see that they were on a PIP. You could see that they had a violent outburst. You could see these things. And listen, if there's security and HR work very closely together, and if you want to draw one parallel, they're both under-resourced and overworked.
For sure.
So giving them that AI tool to sit behind them and say, hey, you may have missed this. You want to check this thing out. And so now we have a Now Assist agent that can pop up and say, hey, HR agent, it looks like this termination is in line with our policies that we might want to have security involved. Would you like me to create a case? So we still put human in the loop. We still took account of, that expertise and knowledge and position of the HR agent. But we were able to help them be better at their jobs. And ultimately, I think that's the power of AI, right?
Yeah, it's influence, it's support, it's taking the burden up off the person and the teams and the departments, as you said, but typically overworked, and it's making life a hell of a lot easier so they can do more, quicker, better. Looking at the journey of Bearing since you came out publicly and launched the business to this immediate success that you're having, can you share any recent examples of customer feedback or success that you've had, which best encapsulates the impact that Bearing can have in a short period of time, and how that may act as a bit of a waving of the flag? Here's who we are. This is what we're doing right now, and this can be implemented very quickly in your organization to make your life a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah, I think the key is, so whether it's AI or it's workflow automation, explainability and transparency are really, really important, right? And so as I was demonstrating those AI agents, really the feedback that I get most often that excites me from a security leader is like, wait, time out. I have humans doing those things. That's the exact same thing. But yes, exactly, right? So I think the key takeaway is, again, security practitioners building a security platform allows us to do the blocking. Because look, what do technologists not want to do? The boring stuff.
Yeah.
Where do companies derive and create value? The blocking and tackling. And we start there. So I think, what I try to tell people about is two things. One, everybody wants to know about AI. Well, you don't get AI without data and infrastructure. ServiceNow is the infrastructure. We use workflows to create that data. Now we can get to AI in the coming quarters. But really what it is you've got somebody sitting in a room manually doing something, and unfortunately, right, the job quality could be up or down, but we can replace that with workflow automation so that it happens every time at scale, according to policy, with clear ROI, because they can make the determination that, well, I have a human doing that and I'm paying them $40 an hour to sit in a room and do it. You're saying that you can do all of that in less than 2 minutes where it takes me 2 hours of human's time? Well, ROI calculator, real quick, you have value creation.
Yeah, it's the speed, it's the quality, it's the accuracy, it's the lack of human error, because repetitive tasks are unfortunately rife for human error. So it makes all the sense and frees people up to do the blocking and tackling and the creative work, which is where humans will always have the greatest impact. Jason, looking at the near-term roadmap, you've talked about, looking at the changes that are coming up in year and capitalizing on that. So you're moving quick, you're staying efficient, you're staying current. When you look at the next 12 months, what are you excited about for the journey with Bearing, the conversations you're having with customers and growing the business?
Yeah, I think that, everything is moving so quickly. And we're just trying to figure out, so let me give you a developer dilemma, right? Oh, we'll call it a product owner dilemma because I'm not a developer. But do I build scripted workflows when AI agents can solve for it more easily in the next 6 months? And where is that trade-off? Where is that balance? Where is the cost comparison from a scripted workflow versus an agentic solution and the consumption costs? So, right, that's where I spend a lot of my time. But the most exciting thing that I think about is, well, let me be clear. The most exciting thing is the thing I'm not thinking about because no one knows where it's going to go, right? That is, and I think that it's really key for folks in my seat. When you start a startup, you're going to be laser focused. And, to use my old background, you're always thinking about the 25 and the 50 meter target. Well, as the CEO now, I need to start shifting up into that 100 meter, 500 meter, 1,000 meter target, right? And looking downstream. And I think the exciting part for me is being open to where this journey takes us. But the next thing on the near term horizon that I see is agent to agent and Claude MCP. All right. And, it's a joke because I write about this in my own industry, but physical security is not moving that quickly. It's not prone to change. And in an industry that barely has APIs, Claude MCP is around the corner. So what does that mean, right? How do we think about building agent-to-agent communication so that we can enable agentic workflows on two sides of applications? And, does that become, from a very low consumption cost, the way that we just do everything moving forward? Do we save that for these, really dynamic situations that require that agent to have that agency to be able to make decisions based on the environment? That's I think that product owner dilemma right now, because you don't want to overinvest in the old way of doing something, but you have to solve the customer's problem. And ultimately you have to meet the customer where they're at.
Yeah. You got to crawl, walk, run. And we know what's coming around the corner, but we still have to get the house in order now before we can even capitalize on what's coming around the corner. As you said, before AI projects, it's the data, it's the infrastructure. So a lot of people still have work to do. And in the security realm, physical security, they're behind the 8 ball a little bit. So we need to play catch up. When you look at the growth trajectory for Bearing and the opportunity that sits in front of you for a tremendous market cap, given there's so many organizations who are far behind, that's going to lead to year-over-year growth, a greater demand. How is that going to impact the team at Bearing? Because you've already built something pretty remarkable with a talented, limited team. As the customer contracts continue to come in, where do you see the need to strengthen within your own org to meet the demand?
Yeah, it's a balance between the two things, right? We don't want to lose that identity as security practitioners.
Yeah.
But we need core ServiceNow skill sets too. And, so we need technical capacity and good product. And one of the things that I'm learning as a founder, I didn't fully understand what product marketing was. Until I went out and built a ever-growing dynamic product. Yeah. And I went, man, this is hard to communicate to people. We need to have a good way of doing this. How do I articulate it? But no, I think, so the way that we think of our go-to-market is our AEs can be general SaaS salespeople, but they get to learn. And where we find the most success is people want to work with us because our mission. Right? People want to work with us because of our mission. If we are the security team, people go, wow, that's really interesting. You're out there doing something. You're not just, moving boxes from one side of the warehouse to the other. You're protecting that traveler, right? You're identifying that threat. You are, closing that gap. And people get excited about that. So we see that on the front end. Our solution consultants, I generally want to hire from within the security industry.
Yeah. The industry knowledge is so valuable.
Well, no, and if you've ever heard of RAMP, it's a financial tool in the startup world. I listened to a podcast with their founder, and he goes, listen, I'm a former founder. I don't sit across from the table and negotiate. I sit next to you, right? Because I've walked in your shoes. I've had those problems. And that's something that's going to be core to our identity at Bearing, right? We want that direct empathy with our customer. But we now have to translate that direct empathy with our customer into ServiceNow knowledge. And so we think about those core skill sets. And really, there are some module specific history that we like to see. A workflow data fabric is massive as that becomes a new certification at ServiceNow. I emailed our head of engineering yesterday going, this thing, I think we want to include this as a nice to have on our JDs moving forward. I want tinkerers. I want naturally curious and innovative people, right? I don't want people that use yesterday's tools to solve tomorrow's problems. I want people that go, now listen, there's a balance there, right? You can't have 30 disruptors in a company of 35 people. But, I do want people that challenge the way those things get done. And ones that, are passionate about our mission. So, if somebody's passionate about our mission, they're passionate about pushing into a new space where we can take this power of this massive, ServiceNow platform and pull it into security. So it's really, because people try to compare us like, oh, are you like SecOps? Are you like IRM? And the answer is, yeah, we are. I want you to know all of it, right? And now we can't do that. So we are looking for how do we federate out some of those skill sets? How do we build a cohesive team that can stay true to that identity?
Jason, thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us. This has been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you sharing your own backstory, the idea that spawned Bearing as a business. It really is a great example of problem and solution first, and then figure out how to use the best of what's available technology-wise. And you've touched on it there. It's ServiceNow infrastructure and AI capabilities tackling an immense problem that is ripe for disruption, which have all the fundamental makings of a great business. So we're excited to see what you and the team Bearing can accomplish in the near term. I know there's going to be a lot of demand for this type of service. So we wish you, the team, and everyone at Bearing the best of luck in the months and years ahead, and look forward to having you back on the show again in the near future.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.